Hello, welcome to another episode of G.I. Joe New News Review. I am David Allen. I am joined by my fantastically special guest, Robert Irizarry, or Racktime Rob, from What's on Joe Mind. It is a pleasure to see you today, Rob. I
Hi.
love listening to all your cool comments, comic book background comments, because I get every one of those references.
I try not to throw in stuff that's just too weird because I I mean, in addition to having the comics, I do like a lot of reading on comic history, so I'll find weird stuff.
Well, see, that's the interesting thing I find about you is your background in comics and stuff like that. Give us a little bit about your background, and I know you also had your own podcast for a long time, the Racktime Rob podcast as well. So you've been talking about comics, and you're a longtime fan of it. Give me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of comics, I've been reading them for since I was like three. Um, I got my first ones on a trip to Maryland, and I think, I got a bunch of DC comics to, kind of keep me quiet, in the car, which I believe may have been the last time I was able to read in the car without throwing the heck up. Um,
Yeah, I don't like to read in the car either.
um, but from there, it was just like, oh, these are great. Can I get more? And my parents were like, well, he's reading, and like his vocabulary is getting crazy, so they must be doing something right. Um, and I just kind of like enjoyed them from there. I could still actually remember which ones were those first ones I got. So I think it was like Superman 302 and Justice League of America 134 and Batman 278, I think. And then there was a DC Superstars that had a bunch of Aquaman reprints in it. Reprinted actually the first story with Black Manta and Ocean Masters in it too. So it was kind of like the movie. And
I'm I'm a minority when it comes to this, but Aquaman is my favorite DC character.
Aquaman is very underrated. And he is actually one of the few characters that was actually served well by the New 52.
Yeah.
Um, he had a really good run there. So
Who was the artist? It was
Ivan
uh,
Reese started off.
Ivan Rice. Yes.
Yeah,
God, is he good?
yeah, he is. He is. He hasn't done much lately, at least like for DC, where he had done most of the work that I had seen. But yeah, no, he was very good on. He draws a nice classic look to everybody.
He does.
Yeah, almost like an updated, of the old DC house style, but from back in the '60s. So.
Right. So obviously, comics must have really touched a nerve with you because the reading, like you said, the vocabulary. Your parents were like, "Hey, let's encourage this." My mother did the same thing with me and stuff like that, and I learned a lot from reading and stuff because I was naturally deaf when I was born, and I had to have surgeries to correct my hearing and stuff like that. So it took a long time for me to be able to speak the way I do now, but I didn't when I was a young kid, and reading helped me learn and understand vocabulary and stuff like that. And so I always wanted to become an English teacher, a reading teacher, and I know you're a teacher.
Yes, I teach children with special needs
Oh, yeah.
at my local high school. So
Well, I had plenty of teachers that were teachers that taught special needs kids. I was a
yeah,
student of theirs. So I appreciate the work that they helped me, and I'm sure a lot of those types of teachers help a lot of kids in the world, and I appreciate it very much because I can speak fairly good. I'm not 100% in my hearing yet, but I can speak pretty good now because of it. So
yeah.
thanks.
I know with in my classroom we're a little bit more life skill focused because that's where yeah, the level that my guys are. Just trying to get them as independent as possible. Pick up as many job skills as we can. We
Vocational.
do still have like academics that we have to meet because even just to get a what they call certificate of completion, they have to earn credits coming from the state. They took this class, they took this class. That they have so many credits accrued in English and in math and
I remember that. We used to always
yeah.
have to do vocational rehabilitation type programs and stuff to make sure we got all those credits and things like that. I do remember that.
Oh, Voc Rehab, I know it's actually something I'd like to do more with my kids because it would get them probably more of the job skills they need. Like right now, like for example, I have to like teach them geometry,
Oh,
and
they
for my
don't need
guy,
that.
it's okay, great, square, circle, recognize that type of thing. But then when you look at the state standards, they still have to like get to the same state standards, and not happening. Just because the ability's not there, but
Yeah, that was always my weakest link was math. I I can do your basic stuff and I can get by and stuff like that, but I never understood why you needed it until I got into the workforce. There's different things you need it, like check booking, making sure you're taking care of your bills. If you're in a restaurant, you have to be able to measure and things like that.
exactly, that's what I'm trying to get them is, handling money, counting money out when you're paying for something, making sure that you're giving the right amount of money, not too much, not too little, that type. So my big focus when I teach them math is focusing on, the more practical. And then, some geometry, so I can call it geometry.
Um, so yeah, so you were a big comic book fan. You got into it when you were a young kid. You actually beat me by 3 years. I got into it at 6. And so but you also did the podcast and stuff like that. Was that a direct lineage from that, or was that from What's on Joe Mind? I don't know what the steps were.
Yeah, it was from What's on Your Mind. Mike asked me to, hey, you want to like do like reviews of the comics and things like that, as a podcast. This is when the What's on Your Mind was still audio only too, so it fit in a little bit better. And I said, oh yeah, sure. And so I was keeping up with the monthly issues, or at least like getting them out where I could maybe like at least do groups and talk about the issues. And then over like last year during the school year, it was a really really booger of a school year, and so literally I am still playing catch up on just from the reading of the comics that I would have to do. There's some titles I've still been buying them, but like I haven't read an issue of them for like like 14 months.
Wow.
So I'm in a hole I'm trying to desperately dig my way out of, which is why there hasn't been like a lot of rack times lately. And the other thing is too, I do want to. This school year is going a lot better. So it's like trying to get back into the swing of things, seeing, do I want this to also be, do I want to tag this in, tag a video component into this as well? The visual, and make it match up with, what we do on Friday nights. So.
Well, I can't imagine why not. I think Chris McLeod was doing that kind of thing where he would go through modern comics and like page by page with a couple of guys, actually the guys from Ireland, Paddy Lennon and Brian Hickey.
Yeah.
And they would go through the comics and stuff. Obviously, it's visual media, so you have, I won't say have to, but it lends itself better if you do have a visual of it to show what it is. Even though comics are supposed to be able to support themselves by their visuals. So if you talked about the visuals, even if you couldn't see them, you should know what the story is. You know what I'm saying? That's what comics were
Yeah.
always touted as.
Yeah, for comics, a bad writer but a good artist can still kind of make something readable.
Yeah.
But a good writer with a bad artist, it just kills a book because it's a visual medium, primarily.
It is.
Ideally, you get both.
Oh yeah. And you could also get a good artist on a bad day.
Yeah. I mean, that happens. Everybody does.
I was just reading something the other day.
These days, I think in comics now, it seems to run a little bit more towards this is the artist we want, so we're going to wait until he finishes it. As opposed to, back in the 70s and the 80s when I started, where it was just like, no, this issue needs to get done. Hurry up. we will put an inventory issue in.
Right, they did the inventory issues, and sometimes the inventory issues were actually better. But they were doing that a lot in the 90s. That's what almost destroyed the comic industry, is the fact that they wanted to wait for artists A and writer X to complete a project, and because they were superstar people let them go. They kind of gave them carte blanche, and that kind of was a big mistake. And I think they're a little bit more stricter with it, because they'll give them more lead time ahead. If they think, like, say, Frank Miller with The Dark Knight Returns 4 or 3 or whatever the version he's up to now, they gave him way more lead time to get that out, and then it came out pretty much monthly without any problems. Because they know, okay, this guy is going to be a problem. Let's give him as much room as we can to get this project out. And they don't even advertise it until they feel that it's pretty close now.
Yeah, that was a big problem, like with when Jeff Johns and Gary Frank were doing Doomsday Clock.
Yes.
The DC, Watchmen crossover, because I think they intended for that to have a much bigger ramification into the larger DC universe.
Yeah.
But it took so long, DC felt it had to move on.
Well, and the thing about it is, from what I understood about it, they tried to mimic the time dates of the original Watchmen. I'm like, why do you want to mimic something that was freaking a year late? Why not just put your story out and have it in continuity and have it affect the characters the way it's intended naturally? Why try to copy something that was a mistake? That doesn't make sense. The logic doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it was. Unfortunately, like I said, it was something that I think there were grander plans for, but the delays kind of killed the book.
Yeah.
I mean, Image has, from the 90s, has how many unfinished miniseries? Every other one they started.
But, the funny thing is, though, out of all those books, Spawn, 335, who would have thought? So it's weird.
Yeah, well, I think early on, McFarlane realized, I can't write, draw, and run a company all at the same time. Yeah. So someone else is going to draw this thing for me.
He drew it, though.
That's when Greg Capullo came in.
He drew it for a good, 30, 40 issues before Greg Capullo came on.
Yeah, and then right around when Capullo, started coming in, I think, it's about the time that you probably noticed that McFarlane toys start cropping up and, things like that. So
yeah, that's true.
The larger empire, he was building.
Yeah. He did a good job. I'm going to give him credit. He doesn't get enough credit, but McFarlane and McFarlane Toys and the whole spiel, he did a good job, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was never big on the McFarlane. I've probably put more of the McFarlane stuff over the last year than I ever had. Because, with the DC license, they actually have done stuff that I have gotten interested in, which is the Batman 66 figures and the new Superpower stuff. I'm not a real huge fan of their actual mainline multiverse stuff, because I really don't need any more versions of evil Batman.
I got the 66 line that came out about 5 or so years ago. I can't remember who put it out.
I think it was Mattel.
Mattel. then the only ones I'm getting are the ones that they didn't get to. They did short 4-inch versions of a lot of those villains, but McFarlane is doing those villains in 6-inch to
Yeah.
match those. So those are the only ones I'm
Oh,
getting.
the little guys? Yeah, the little guys, I think, actually, I remember those little guys because I got some of them. I think the little guys were Funko.
Oh, the little 4-inch ones.
Yeah, but I think Mattel, when they had the DC license, it was at the time, I think at that time, like all the rights had finally cleared for Batman 66.
Right.
So they jumped in and did a line.
Yeah.
And I never really liked the look of those. I actually like the McFarlane uh, figures better. I think they come off a little bit nicer looking
They do have
than
a
the
little
Mattel
more
ones did.
detail.
They a little bit more detail, and they don't have what one of my cohorts calls the brutal chest cut.
Uh,
And
to each their own.
yeah, and I do not mind. I have gone on record as saying I don't mind the chest cut. If you want that articulation, you got to do something.
Yeah.
So, but on those particular figures, like like in the Mattel classics, sometimes that chest cut kind of falls into the musculature naturally, and on the Batman 66, they did not. So it just
Yeah.
they looked really
Adam
really
West.
awkward.
Adam West did look a little weird with that, and Robin did too. You're right.
Yeah,
Some of the other ancillary characters that didn't affect them, but the two main ones that did affect them because they weren't they weren't muscly people to begin with. They were
yeah,
slender, and that was the whole shtick of it, right? So when they do a figure, it kind of looks scrawny looking.
yeah. I mean, in those days, you did not have to get jacked up to play the superhero.
Yeah,
You just
right.
had to
But McFarlane
get rid of the spare tire.
McFarlane is adding a little bit more imagination to the figures than was originally there or supposed to be there.
Yeah. Although, the DC edict on not including like actual weapons with the figures is a bit ridiculous.
I did not know that until I heard you say that on the show last week. I was like, I didn't know that there was an edict on that. That's interesting.
They don't want like they apparently don't want the figures coming with like handgun type weapons.
Well, and I thought that was
Which-
strange with Otto Preminger. I was like, he doesn't have a
Yeah, I mean
gun?
that's the funkiest looking gun. I mean, there's no gun that looks like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not, if going back on like standards and practices, you're not going to get any imitatable acts out of that type of thing.
Right, exactly.
It is PVC pipe and, tinfoil.
With DC,
and clearly.
But with DC and Warner Brothers changing hands 3 times over the last 5 years, who knows what's going on, where, who's got the authority, who says what. There's no note.
I mean, I get, not wanting a bunch of like gun-toting lunatic figures, out there. With the news and everything, but it's kind of like, an umbrella for the Penguin. I think we could do that.
Well,
especially since on the show it just fired crazy purple knockout gas.
That's true. You're right. So let's get back on track. We get off track a little bit. I feel like what's on Joe Mind, you guys go all over the place sometimes.
That's half the fun.
It is half the fun. And when I had Mike and I had Mark on, I said hosts of the irreverent What's on Joe Mind, because that's really what it is. It's very irreverent. It's fun. This last episode that I was watching was such a fun, hilarious episode. I was like, God, they really need to go on the road and do this as like a shtick or something like that, a comedy routine, because it's hilarious.
I mean, the four of us get along when we get together. So I mean, it since we all have like all this distance between it. Well, Mike and I don't, but
you have what, 10 feet?
Yeah. But I mean, where Joe is and where Mark is, it's not a hop, skip, and a jump. So,
well, it feels like it feels like you're not like the 80s movies, and you're in my generation, so you'll get this analogy like the old 80s movies where the kids were like a group of kids and they were picking on each other and have fun with each other and stuff like that. It's like you guys are your own little group of kids having fun with one another, and you don't take it seriously, you don't take it personally, and it's just there to add some enjoyment to the public's viewing.
Yeah, I mean, we all know each other well enough that, I mean, this is banter born of, half a dozen joke-ons. Um, and I mean, and also, I mean, we're talking about, little plastic army men.
Yeah,
So
right.
why be that serious?
Well, it's a
Sometimes when we'll
serious
go off
thing.
track, we'll see like in the comments scrolling by, where's I get back on track? I didn't come here for baseball. It's like, lighten up. You're allowed to have another interest besides, G.I. Joe.
And that's the thing, though, because you're the identity, or I shouldn't say the identity, but the format in which you guys have the show is nothing like any other show out there. And I've talked to a lot of different people from different shows, and you can go on the internet and you can look on the Order of Battle podcast, Full Force, Toy Kind of Mood, the Terradrome, Talking Joe, even my own stuff. None of it's the same. It's all different. And I think if you tried to make it the same, I think the audience would tune out pretty quick. And obviously,
Yeah.
you guys have a fairly nice, chunky audience.
Yeah, we could always. I know Mike in particular would always like it to be chunkier. Um, you know, uh, and because there was a certain audience when it was audio only. I mean, they had a pretty large listenership. But like the nature of podcast casting, at least when it comes to this, seems to have changed a little bit, and it's now more of the visual and going on to YouTube and things like that. So I think that we're still kind of like in that growth stage of that aspect. It's a little bit like starting over.
Well, that's the thing too. There are some that are on YouTube. There are some that are still audio. There are some that are visual and stuff like that. I have a friend that tells me, David, try to keep yours as quick as possible. I'm like, you can't get into the meat of what you want to get to if you do it quickly. And he's like, no one's going to watch a 2-hour chat with some person in the GI Joe community. I said, why not? If you make it engaging, if you make it interesting, and if they're curious about what the individual guest or whatever is saying or the host is asking, it's entertaining. It's
Yeah,
up to the viewer.
yeah, and I know that's something we try definitely not to go over that 2 hour limit. And when you figure, the vast majority of YouTube stuff is, if you go longer than 20 minutes, you start to get the tune out. But it seems like, there's at least a steady stream of people watching. And,
What
so
I've seen,
it's funny where even in weeks where we get, there's a real lack of news or material, we still have our, keep it running. We got to get into this 2 hours or people, so.
but you have more things than the news. That's the thing. Yours
Yeah.
isn't 100% dictated by the news. You talk about conventions. You talk about what you got. You talk about your shout outs. You talk about your lives and stuff like that's what I was kind of allude to earlier, that your friends, your family unit type of thing, and you don't need to talk about the news all the time. I don't talk about the news unless it has to do with the subject that I'm bringing on to
Yeah.
mention, like a Kickstarter or something like that. We'll mention that, but that's not what I do, and that's not why I do this. I do it because I want the Joe community to be bigger and see all the different types of people that are in the community. That's why I do it. So mine's is totally different.
It should be. I mean, it should be, kind of a big umbrella. And I think one of the things that unfortunately shrank the umbrella and maybe made little separate cell umbrellas was losing a convention.
You think so?
Yeah, when Hasbro pulled the license, from Fun Pub for Transformers and GI Joe. Um, I mean, those Joe Cons I looked forward to every year because it was kind of like the family reunion almost.
Well, come to Joe Fest. It's a community event, and it's getting
Yeah,
bigger every year.
yeah, I may have to check that out at some point. But like I said, there was something about the atmosphere about JoeCon, which Mike had been to a couple, and there was one year it came to Indianapolis, which was the first one I went to because all I had to do was just drive downtown. Didn't even need the hotel or anything like that.
Right.
And by the time and then I was left just saying, okay, when's the next one? You want to go to Dallas? Are we going to Dallas? So
I completely understand your feeling because the first one I went to, I think it was 2010 or 2011 in Orlando. And when I realized there's a JoeCon, what? I've been going to conventions my whole life since the late 80s, and I didn't know this. I should have because I was reading Toy Fair things and there was ads, but I don't know why it didn't dawn on me. So the first one I went to was in Orlando, and from then on I couldn't get enough. I got into all the Joe community Facebook pages and stuff like that, and I started doing reviews and things like that 2 or 3 years back, and then they canceled it, and then I was like, oh, that sucks. And then
yeah,
thankfully Joe Fest started up, and I got involved with helping run that show, and it's getting bigger and bigger every year. And then obviously AR is coming, and I went to AR last year and absolutely loved it. Totally different feeling than Joe Fest and JoeCon. It's
yeah,
more of a, I don't know what the right word is. It feels very warm, welcoming, feels like you're going home to your people type of a
when
atmosphere.
I would talk to people at JoeCon who had been to AR, that's the description that they gave too. I mean, it was basically, all the stuff they do for kids and things like that too. And try and get everybody involved, not just hey, dad dragged the kids along, and so he can buy a bunch of toys he's never going to let them play with. Uh, so, as opposed to and AR had like that little bit of a different feel.
I think
Um,
that's the thing. Both of those shows are the perfect match for the Joe community. You have one side of the spectrum and the other side of the spectrum. One is definitely a business, but it's a business that is geared towards the community because they're getting a lot of community people, and it's getting bigger. And but AR doesn't do that. They're more geared towards the family aspect. Not that you can't take a family to the Joe Fest, you can, but it's a different
yeah,
aspect. So if you have a
yeah.
chance, I would go to both of them if you have a chance.
Like as AR unfortunately comes at a bad time of year uh,
Teachers.
for teachers.
It is the beginning of
um,
November.
yeah, yeah. Otherwise, I would give that serious thought. Um, but yeah, it's a little rough to try and schedule something out like that um, for teaching.
I understand.
But hey, maybe one day
Don't you have
because
substitutes?
it these days maybe.
Oh yeah, right. It's just as bad here in Florida for teachers.
Yeah,
There's not a lot of them. After COVID, it was like it was a one of those things where you had a dinghy, and you were in the middle of the ocean, and everybody was jumping off the dinghy into the shark waters. It was, oh man, it was pretty bad here.
yeah. It's teaching. It has just as apparently every other profession on earth. Um, since COVID has basically not been nonstop hanging up the help wanted sign.
Yeah,
Um, and there haven't been as many takers as there would have been in the past.
because
And
it's a
like I
lot.
said, same thing for apparently every other industry on earth.
Well, but teaching is a little bit different because, well, I would say a lot different because not only is most germs and most uh, um, home illnesses, 90% of it comes from schools, you know?
Yeah,
When I worked
we
for
are little germ
Walmart,
factories.
well, yeah, when I worked for Walmart, there was that, I don't know if you remember these big head things that were like these costume head things, cats and dogs and critters and stuff like that. And we had bins of them, right? And I said, what are they doing? All these kids are going to start putting these on and they're going to be spreading the lice like crazy. There was a lice epidemic that year. And I predicted it. And every single kid shared their.
It
Like,
just
what?
it just takes one.
Yeah. Oh my God. So it doesn't.
Yeah,
That's where it comes from. It comes from schools. It comes
yeah.
from kids. You know, it's not nobody's fault. It's not intentional. It's
No,
just the
yeah,
nature of it.
yeah. You know, the high school I work at is the largest one in the state of Indiana.
Ah.
So I mean, we have thousands of kids in that building every day. And a couple hundred teachers. So it's just like,
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. You can wash your hands 4 times a day, wear your mask, but you're gonna come home with something eventually.
yeah,
It's just you're
probably
not
not what you were
wiping.
trying to prevent. Something different.
Right, because you can't wipe down every desk and every chair with Lysol. You can't wipe down the banisters with Lysol. You can't go to the
Yeah,
food court and get trays, wipe them all down. It's impossible.
yeah. I mean, we didn't have like during COVID, we did not have like massive COVID outbreaks. We were getting stomach bugs running through the place like crazy. It's
Wow,
like, of course, because
that's what you need. So that's I don't know what I was trying to say. But yeah, so the every field, you're right, every field got affected by it. And I think teaching is a lot more difficult to get people because you have to have state certification, you have to
yeah,
continue your education, you have to deal with the kids being brats, you have to, now on top of that you can get deathly ill, and a lot of teachers are lifers, so they're 50, 60 years old, 40-year-old teacher, tenures, and they're not going to risk their lives over stuff like that. So there's a lot of factors that go into why teachers aren't coming back.
yeah. And I think that kind of, being home alone for a while caused kind of everybody to just kind of reassess everything. So,
Yeah,
we won't see what kind of ramifications, I think, until years down the line.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Uh, Florida's in the same boat. I have a few friends that are teachers, and it's rough. It's rough. Um, so what was I trying to get? I lost my train of thought here. So yeah, the two conventions. So yeah, I think Joe Fest, we would have you guys, What's on Joe Mind, in a heartbeat, and do a podcast there and stuff like that. We have some real good tech support people. I'm sure you know who Carson Metaxas is. He's a
Oh yeah.
tech guy. He runs our panel room, and I do a lot of the floor stuff and things like that, and there's a few different people involved. But we have people from all over the community that are involved with the show and stuff like that. And you guys have been in the G.I. Joe community as a podcast for over 11 years, 11 and a half years. And I was talking to Mark and your brother Mike about it. I said, to do something that long, anything that long, that's a lot. That says a lot about the individuals and the product, that you could do it for that many years. Because trying to talk to people constantly, come up with new information, this, that, and the other. Yeah, you can talk about the new products and stuff like that, but that's only a certain amount of what you have to do. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, and I mean, and it does, there's and Mike really does a lot of the heavy lifting, on that. So he's the one, trying to hunt down, hey, who's got a Kickstarter going? Who dug up, this prototype, and can we talk about it? Who's writing a book? Who's uh, who has sussed out the latest product leak list? That type of thing.
Now we don't have to worry about the stupid product leak list. Guys, that wasn't that a annoying thing? Those product trying to figure who the hell XZYZ2B, who the hell that guy was.
Well, when we, our thing was, when we got a hold of the actual list of who was, coming out for this year, and it turned out to be 100% right. It was quite a thing, but and also had to not only you had to find the right way to do it, and make sure that we didn't blow a source.
Yeah, sources are hard.
And a lot of people say, well, why don't you name your source? You don't always name the source, because just because the person can't be named doesn't mean the information isn't right.
Yeah.
You check and you verify the information off of other sources, and then you decide to go with it, because that's what you call journalism.
That's a dirty word.
Yeah, as opposed to, that's what's called actual reporting, as opposed to letting fly with the latest rumor. And, sometimes that rumor is right. A lot of times it's not, and a lot of, the rumor sites will go, well, see, we got that one right. Well, broken clock is right twice a day. So
yeah,
doesn't mean it's not broken.
Well, and that's the thing. If you are smart, if you're in this community and you're on all these Facebook pages, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that Duke with a Tiger Force motorcycle is coming out. Come on.
No, yeah. But to know exactly when.
Well, we don't even know when, because we may get it next year. Who the hell knows?
Yeah. To know exactly when, or to get like the definite word that yes, that is coming. If you want to go with that on your show, then you want to make sure that you're right. Because if you're just blowing smoke, eventually people stop watching, because they know maybe he's right, but probably not.
Yeah, there is a show that does that. There is one show. I'm not going to say who it is. There is a show that does that, and I stopped watching them. And the fact that they didn't cite their sources and give credit stuff, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to support people like that, because if these guys are doing the work and they're the ones that are there, you should show them respect and give them that credit. So I don't think that's fair.
The greatest frustration is when people talked about when the product list that we leaked came out. When we revealed we had that information and put it out there, knowing, and we, like I said, we had it came from a good source, was checked against other sources, so we felt fairly confident we were, that this list was going to be pretty accurate, or we probably wouldn't have done. But then, when we got that has the PulseCon last year, where they started revealing stuff off that list, it was like, oh, here we go. And people realized, oh, that list was right. Because there were some people who gave us flack as just being just throwing clickbait out there. I was like, no, this is it's like no, but let it go, because we were confident in the information.
Well, and that's the thing. You don't have to justify your decisions. You don't have to justify your what you say or what you do to anybody. All you have to do is be confident and do it with integrity. And whatever happens is on the other people out there in the ether and stuff like that. And
then as basically the list comes through as all right, and everyone just talked about, oh yeah, the leak list from who, whoever. Oh.
Well, now you don't have to worry about stuff like that because they're putting out
Yeah, no, they have you know, if you want to blame us for Hasbro tightening up its ship, you know, but that's what happens when you spring a leak. You know, the plumbers come and fix it. So yeah, I mean that's probably the reason why you get the pipeline reveal where they'll say we're working on Hawk and Tripwire.
But how many pipelines do we have that have yet? I thought for sure we were going to get 4 more of those renders that they showed at San Diego Comic-Con, because if you look at when those were shown, the original pipeline pictures were shown at the beginning of June, when they said they were going to do all this stuff during June, all these different events during June. Those first pipelines were shown then. So then they showed the renders at San Diego Comic-Con, and then we got the figure actual computer composites and blah 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 and all that stuff at PulseCon. So I thought for sure we would get another 4 of those renders from the pipeline, because they showed like 8, I think it was 8 pipelines during June, and then San Diego Comic-Con had a couple, 2 or 3 in fact, and then now we just got another 5. So we're like about 20 pipeline reveals in the hole without
some of those
render.
pipelines, though, I mean, we've gotten the digital render for, because Rock and Roll and Shipwreck and Copperhead and Torpedo,
right? Those are the first.
Were the first 4, and
right.
Now we've got digital renders. And the next time they do like a Joe panel or something on the Pulse, that's probably your next pre-order with. Plus that Bazooka, where they showed us the regular color.
Well, that was an old one.
Yeah, I mean, we knew Bazooka was coming, but I don't remember them ever announcing regular Bazooka.
Yeah, they did.
I mean, we knew Tiger Force was coming.
Yeah. No, they did. They did Bazooka. I think it was a couple months early. It was like in April or someplace around there, because that's when we found out about Duke with the Tiger Force. We found out about Kamakura. We found out about regular Recondo and Bazooka, and all that was at the same time. CoverGirl, Falcon.
Yeah, like I said, it's been so. I've lost track of like what we still need to look out for now. I know, like,
well, there's a lot.
Snow Job was in the pipeline, and and Ripper and
Rippers. What's
Scrap Iron.
Scrap Iron.
The Televiper and the Treble Double.
Tunnel Rat.
Tunnel Rat.
Who else? There's a bunch.
Yeah, I mean, even the biggest surprises for me, because they were outside the
Big Ben
and the Range Viper were the 2 biggest surprises for me, because they're outside the like what seems to be that 82 to 87 wheelhouse.
I don't know. They've been dabbling once in a while. That's why you got a Kamakura.
Yeah.
You got a Sergeant Slaughter. Well, I guess he was 86.
Sergeant Slaughter would have been in that. If he was on the Sunbow cartoon. So
yeah.
But Kamakura, like I said, was it also an interesting one, because from the Devil's Due, which basically has officially been disavowed.
That's a whole subject I wanted to talk to you about, because I'm curious about this, but we'll keep with the figure thing. Yeah, so there's at least 20 pipeline reveals, at least up to Joe, the PulseCon. From PulseCon to June, there's about 20 figures that
That's
have not seen anything for.
Yeah. So, but they'll come. There's a point where I think they're dealing with the fact that they've got stuff on the back burner, because when we did that list, all the things like Stalker and Tomax and Zaymot and Dusty and the Crimson Guard, that was all supposed to be first half of 2022.
Right, it was all 6 months late.
Yeah, so now it's back half of 2022, maybe bleeding into 2023. Because of all the shipping and distribution problems that have been going on.
We were supposed to get Spirit, Storm Shadow, and the Cobra Trooper or whatever it was in
the Cobra
January
Officer.
or something like that, right?
I think around March. Crockmaster was supposed to be January,
Oh yeah,
and
Crockmaster.
then I know early, not too long after that we were supposed to get that wave of Spirit and Storm Shadow and the Cobra Officer.
Yeah, they're all messed up. So I
I
think
mean, the
that's
Alley Vipers and Bats were probably, they showed up this year, but they were probably supposed to be the end of 2021.
yeah, they were a little early. As soon as they revealed them, they started, I guess, in January, started trickling in and stuff like that. People were a little surprised, but that was one of those worst kept secret type things. The Alley Viper. He's been on the darn website,
He
Joe.
was on the
Hazard
back.
Joe website, so we knew we were going to get it because they were doing everybody that was new artwork on there. So it was logical they were going to do him in the Bat because they were new artwork and they were eventually put on the package, and they were like, okay, they're going to be next.
Yeah, although I don't think you can look at that website anymore
No, not
as
anymore.
because there's a lot of people upcoming and that have been through that are not on that website. That website hasn't been touched since
Yeah.
I think summer of 2021.
Yeah, they have not been keeping up with it, which because I think the figures, the first like 8 or 10 figures were based off of that website because of the video game Operation Blackout and stuff, and they had to pivot. And so because they pivoted away from the video game aesthetic and figure aesthetics, the website wasn't accurate, even though they're still using a lot of the artwork and stuff,
Yeah.
the symbols and stuff on the side of the package. They're still using this stuff that's on the website and everything like that. It's weird.
And they'll keep doing that because nobody seems to like the 5 language file card, which I don't blame them for not liking the 5 language file card.
It's one of those things. I understand why they're doing it,
Yeah,
but there's got to be something they could do better. Maybe put a normal file card inside the box that's already cut out.
I think what we might be seeing is something I think that the Transformers line is going to experiment with, where they're putting the QR code on there,
Right.
and the QR code will give you, like your file card in, your proper language.
Yeah, I saw that. I was curious about it. I was like, that's
so
some new
if the
technology.
Transformers are doing that and it seems to work, a little bit, then I think they'll. It's not that hard to put it on a Joe package or like a Marvel Legends package and
Yeah,
that type of thing.
it is. It is very cool. That's
Yeah.
definitely moving into the future.
Yeah, and it'd be better than getting an NFT, for an on a starting lineup figure.
So I've been speaking to recently Josh Blaylock and
Okay.
Brandon Jurwa, and I had plans to speak with Tim Seeley. Hasn't worked out yet because he's a teacher as well, and his school and stuff like that has been getting in the way. But I talked to the other two and stuff like that. And now that Joe's changing hands, it's going to somebody that might be working at Image, Robert Kirkman, Dream Sky or Dream Wave, Skybound, something. And he's an Image guy. Is there a possibility we may change the company continuity back to the previous Image, even though Devil's Due was a subsidiary of Image? Maybe we may change the company continuity back to that continuity and keep Larry Hama's comic going the way it has for 40 years, but change the company continuity back to Devil's Due's continuity, where they left off at the end of Devil's Due 2007 or 8. Is there a possibility? Because I know Kirkman and those guys were very good friends. They did a lot of conventions together back in the day before Kirkman got really popular and stuff like that. What are your thoughts?
I think number one, I think there's a really good chance that the Real American Hero book may keep going.
Right.
But I don't know if they would jump back into, the Disavowed continuity, because both the Real American Hero continuation that IDW did and the Disavowed continuity had the same start point,
Yes.
which is after issue 155.
Right.
Um, and the fact that that Larry has dumped basically another 145 issues on top of that might trump the Disavowed continuity. So they might if Skybound wants to do its own kind of fresh start on it, I think it might come from a new starting point, as opposed to picking up where the Devil's Due stuff left off. Because Devil's Due, I dropped out of Devil's Due when they canceled the first book with the Red Shadow storyline.
Yeah.
And then hopped back on at the very end.
The 12
for the World War III.
Gotcha.
Because I wanted to see how they wrapped it up. And they kind of put a bow on everything.
They did.
They did kind of put a bow on everything as well. Because I think they took this, well, we're not doing it anymore. We get a chance to finish this story, and somebody else can just start anew. Yeah. Which, it was probably the right tack to take.
IDW has had so many starts and restarts. I'm not even sure what their actual comic company continuity is. Not Larry Hama's. There's been so many starts and stops and miniseries and different parallel universes. Theirs is like all over the place. Even though I love Chuck Dixon and I love Robert Atkins' work, and there was some cool stuff that came out of it, it's very erratic. They had twice as long to mess around with it than Devil's Due did. Yeah,
and that erraticness, basically, the only IDW book I was collecting regularly was the Larry Hama one. When they picked up the license, I started in and was kind of like, all right, this is okay. And it kind of fell into the trap of, here's a beloved character that we're going to introduce and kill him 2 panels later for the sheer shock of it. Ha-ha! Look at this. We're being edgy. I was like, well, why don't you try telling the story with that character first? Because particularly in G.I. Joe, it's not like a DC or a Marvel book where you kill that character off, and then, when you feel like it, you can kind of bring them back by some weird, ridiculous science, magic, whatever, because it's a superhero story, and you can do that type of thing.
Unless it's Sneak Peek.
But, yeah, well, again, Sneak Peek was a mistake. It was a goof more than anything else. That Larry went, uh-oh, and then tried to write around. G.I. Joe, I think that type of thing breaks the rule. Even in a property that has, a cloned emperor running around, and
there's a lot of other things going on besides that.
Yeah, there's always that open window of Cobra Law over there somewhere. But
none of them really went there. Even Devil's Due never went there. IDW really never went there. There was like a special, but the special had nothing to do with any continuity at all.
There is probably some way to do a Cobra Law story, but you have to do it completely different from the way Hasbro did initially, and the way the movie turned out.
Right, I agree with you. You could do it kind of like the Red Shadows, like it's this faction that exists, but it's in the shadows, basically, and it's been there the entire time.
This is some lost experiment of Dr. Venom, and now look what they've done. That type of thing.
Well, that's a totally cool idea, actually. I wish you would write that, actually. That's pretty funny.
Or you just find this weird group of people in the Himalayas, and Cobra allies itself with them, but they're not really behind Cobra. They're not the faceless power behind Cobra all along.
It just takes creative writing and someone with some chops that can tell a compelling story.
Yeah, well, I mean, ultimately, though, even in those days when Hasbro came up with the Cobra Law storyline, the worst case scenario is basically exactly what happened. After 2 years, it's out of the assortment. You don't even have to talk about it.
Well, as a toy, maybe.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, sure, people will remember it, but there are, in DC and Marvel in their continuities, if they come across, if there's a story that was just stupid, the way to get around it is just stop talking about it.
And see, that's the thing, though. And when it comes to comics and stuff like that, it's a cyclical type of a thing. If somebody like Lobo appears in Omega Men in whatever issue 4 back in like 81 or whatever, and then some other guy says, I like that guy, Lobo, 10 years later, introduces him into Justice League International, or beats Guy Gardner up, and then the fans are like, that was awesome. We want to see more of this guy. And then he gets his own series, and now you can't get rid of Lobo.
Yeah, but Lobo hasn't been as big a deal as he was back in the 90s.
Not
but
now.
The guy who thought Lobo was kind of cool to bring in was Keith Giffen, who drew Lobo in Omega.
Right, he created it. Yeah.
So I mean, so he was the guy who, he decided to just dust off an old creation.
Right. But that's happened so many times, though, with characters. Wolverine, Punisher, Lobo,
Yeah.
Look at all the Guardians of the Galaxy. Look at the entire roster of the modern Guardians of the Galaxy. They're all has-been characters. Groot, Rocket Raccoon, Star-Lord, Gamora, Drax, all has-beens that had their day, and whoops, hey, let's slap them into this. And guess who that guy that did that, too? Keith Giffen.
Yeah. Yes, he did. Back in Annihilation,
for doing that.
Yeah. Did you ever read the Annihilation miniseries?
I wrote a book about it.
Oh, it's fantastic. I love it.
I love it. I love all that cosmic stuff. It's one of my all-time favorite things. I'm writing a book. If I get it finished by the end of this year, I will send you a copy.
Yeah, it Marvel Cosmic. Had been such a fallow idea until Annihilation.
Yeah,
they really had. It had really kind of petered out in the 80s, and which was strange because there was still a Silver Surfer buff going on. But Silver Surfer was really like the only spot that would touch it anymore.
Yeah, that's true. They did the Infinity Watch, but it didn't really hit the numbers they needed. And a lot of Marvel books were going down because of the Marvel implosion, whatever you want to call it, the industry implosion. So they could only keep books that were really doing serious numbers. And your factoid the other day where 100,000 copies was the death knell of a title. Nowadays, if a book gets $36,000 or 36,000 copies, it's doing fantastic. I'm like, what the hell happened?
Yeah, 100,000 copies is the top of the list. Where, back in the 60s, they canceled Doom Patrol for that.
Right.
I mean, not only canceled that, they blew them up.
Yeah. The industry's so different today than it was 30 years ago or 25 years ago or whatever it was.
Yeah, well, and I think it's something comics, in a way, did to themselves.
Yeah.
Because when I first started reading comics, and back in the 60s, basically comic books were, in every drugstore, on every newsstand, in every supermarket,
They were trying to bring it back to that with DC, where they did those big,
the big books in Walmart, but then Walmart would throw them in some lost corner somewhere. So
yeah, they did.
They need to do that in a bunch of stores, not just Walmart.
Yeah.
It was not a bad idea, but you put it in the largest retailer in America, but the largest retailer in America gets so much stuff, and they really don't care where they stick it.
Yeah.
Particularly not something that's only going to cost somebody $4.
True.
And that was part of the problems comics was running into on those newsstands and things like that, is that the prices of magazines were going up, and prices on comics were going up, but not anywhere near large enough. Time magazine went from like 10 cents to $1, and comic books went from 10 cents to 35 cents. So what's your newsstand owner going to do? He's going to stock it with the stuff that's going to make him more money, and that's not those comic books over there.
Yeah.
So they went into the direct market, and we've got the birth of comic book shops and stuff like that. But unfortunately, it meant that you had to go look for them.
And
They weren't always in your face. It
but
was a much steadier stream of income, but you made people look for them
it
as
was a
opposed to them always being able to find it.
it was a destination type of a place, if you were in the
Yeah.
right area, New York City, Chicago, cities that you could go to and have a destination place like that and stuff like that. That was cool. You could get with your buddies. You can go to the comic shop. If the comic shop was a creative outlet place where they did unique things, like some of them have role-playing games, some of them had video games, some of them had, different stuff going on, events and stuff like that, then you could do a lot of stuff. You know, I didn't go to comic stores like that. I went to the old dusty places that you had to shake off the dirt from the comics before you could buy them and stuff. That's the type of place I went to.
The first comic shop I saw was basically a place called the Incredible Pulp, which was in New York. It was across the street from the church that we would go to, from the Catholic church. And what's the Incredible Pulp? And went in there one day and said, "Oh my God, it's full of all cold comic books."
But that's perfect to go against the church because the kids didn't want to be at church. Their church was across the street.
Then the story gets better. The Incredible Pulp moved to up the street from my house.
Good for them.
It was a half a block away.
Wow, that worked out for you then. But your parents, they were happy though. You were reading. Your literacy were getting better.
Yeah, but I was just at the same time I was like, yeah, you better get a job because we're tired of you hitting us up for money for these comic books.
Well, and that's the thing. When I was old enough,
I got a paper route.
That's the same thing with me. I was old enough to work. I got my first job when I was 13 years old, working at a flea market, $5 a day. But $5 a day, 2 days, that's $10. How many comic books could you buy in the mid-'80s?
Yeah, back in those days, they were like 75 cents a pop. So,
yep, the flea market was right behind my house.
Yeah, I mean, you could get 12.
Yep, a week.
Yeah. And in New York, there wasn't any sales tax on comic books, so it was just,
I lived in New Hampshire, so I think there was something else going on there, but I don't know. It didn't bother me, though. But yeah, my mom and dad, they were like, all right. And then when we moved, I'm like, Mom, we got to go to the comic store. The new comics are coming out, blah, blah, blah. And they wouldn't go every week because we moved like an hour away. And I was like, please, please. So we would go every 2 weeks. So I would have to get 2 weeks worth of comics. And I had graduated into working in restaurants and stuff at that point and getting a salary, and it was like what, 13.
Until I could drive. When we first moved to Indianapolis, it was the comic book store. There was one in the town we were living in, but it closed like within a year of us moving there. So then we had to go into a part of Indianapolis, and that was a further drive. So basically, it was like, we get like maybe every 2 weeks or so and stuff like that. But then another one opened up in the town. It was just up the corner from the high school. So on Wednesdays, a new comic day, after school, I would just walk up the corner from the high school and then walk home.
And you found out all your buddies from high school, the ones that were cool, were at the comic store, right?
Not quite.
Oh man.
This was basically late 80s, early 90s. So, the comic book fan was still in the closet back then.
Let's see.
As opposed to just the comics being in the closet.
Well, that is cool, though. Everybody has their stories and everybody has their way that they got into the comic book world and stuff like that. And yours is cool just as much as the next guy and mine's and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that's one of the most important things that I find is all your cool little anecdotes and little stuff that you say and stuff like that. And a lot of the guys on the show, I don't know if they get it. I don't think they get some of the references. They got your X-Men reference the other day. I know that. But a lot of those things, I'm like, God, he needs somebody to talk to that is on the same level.
Mike will get most of
them. 2 years younger than you, right?
Yeah. But he'll get most of them because he's seen most of the especially the ones that I make reference to. I've made those references to him before.
Oh,
So he's used to that, and he'll just read mine. So he's um. But yeah, the fact that I could throw an X-Men reference out is actually because I was never been a big X-Men reader.
no?
No, I mean, in terms of, like I said, the biggest run of that I've read, I don't have any of the issues, but I have like the collections. When Marvel did the Essentials in black and white, I bought the Claremont Byrne run of X-Men because
Yeah,
I mean if
that's
you're going to read
essential.
one thing from X-Men, you
Yeah,
should read that.
it's
You
essential.
know,
And it
yeah,
says it right on the spine of it, essential.
yeah, and for that it is essential. I mean, and it's good reading too. And that was also before. I mean, the X world became just bloated with its own excess.
That's true. That was my era, was when they blew it up. But my own defense, I liked it before it blew up. My favorite era is the Australian era,
Okay,
because I just like Silvestri's artwork. The character lineup was really cool. The designs of Storm, Longshot, Dazzler, Colossus, Wolverine,
yeah, that kind
Psylocke,
of mid
all these.
'80s lineup there.
Yeah, that was a really, really cool era. There was a lot of stuff that Claremont put into that period. I don't think a lot of people realized what was going on.
And that was really the first time things had been shaken up membership wise
Yeah.
on that book, probably since uh, the all new, all different started in Giant Size X Men #1.
Yeah.
I mean, they would they'd add a character, lose a character, here or there, but a lot you had the same basic kind of lineup for most of that run.
Yeah, for about 100 issues, from about 95 to 100, it was basically the same team.
Yeah, occasionally Cyclops goes off to have a kid, but they'll abandon them later. Um, he became such a jerk.
He did. He got killed off, and when he got brought back, thankfully he went back to being a better character, a more even keel character.
he would have to.
Yeah, he was a real jerk for a while there.
Well, I remember I did buy X Factor #1 back in the day, and that is very much the start of Jerk Flops.
Yeah.
Because he's off living in Alaska, happily married, wife and son, and the minute he hears on the hey, we just found Gene, he's on the next plane to New York.
Yeah.
And doesn't really hot foot a plane back.
I
I'm like,
I always speculated maybe because Mr. Sinister had been messing with the Summers gene pool before those kids, him and his brother, were ever even born. I think he was messing with the Summers gene pool when his father was still living on Earth, before he got kidnapped by aliens in space.
yeah, no, that's no. You're just trying to find. You're just trying to find an excuse. No, he went full jerk.
Okay. No Sinister manipulation then.
No, because Sinister was nary a gleam in Chris Claremont's eye at that point. So yeah, no, he was just being a tool bag.
His first appearance is like a throwaway appearance too, where he beats up Sabretooth like in an issue. And I'm like, this is one of the best X-Men villains, and all he is in the last 2 pages beating up Sabretooth. I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
He's one of my all-time favorite X-Men villains. But
yeah, I was kind of like, what they need to, this X Factor idea is interesting, but they ever going to come across Scott abandoning his family?
Well, now you know why Madeline Pryor went all nuts on him.
Yeah, and that I think was just to, again, sugarcoat the idea of Scott abandoning his family.
There was a lot of stuff though in X-Men. I was rereading my Uncanny X-Men from, I think it was 195 to 1 or 270, not too long ago, a few months ago, and there was stuff in there like they used. I have to be careful how I say it. Chris Claremont did this in a comic. It was 196 in a story that had to do with discrimination. He used the N word. I'm not going to say the whole word because I don't want my audience to go ballistic and say David used the N word or whatever. Chris Claremont used the N word in the story that had to do with discrimination. But it was done in a way where it made very logical sense. The story, it was dictated by the story, and it was not offensive in any way. And I was stunned that Marvel let him do that.
I haven't read, and that might have been why I haven't read that one, but I think I've seen that panel.
Yes.
Because I think it's Kitty Pryde who actually says it, isn't it?
I thought it was Magneto, but I could be wrong.
Might have been. Well, you know what? I think Kitty Pryde did it too. I think, maybe it might have been in the graphic novel.
Well, it was on it was in a college campus, and there was people that were being raped, and it turns out the rapist was African American, and Magneto beat the living crap out of him and said something and used that word. And he says, "How can you use that word? Blah 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 blah." I said, "Because of your actions and what you're doing." Or Magneto said that to the character, because of how you're living your life and treating people and raping women, blah blah blah. You're this and blah blah blah. And it was done within the story, and it made sense. But a positive, it was Magneto. Could have been Kitty Pryde. They were together, but it could have been.
Yeah.
But so
I often wonder if that's I mean, they wouldn't do that. They'd probably find a better, maybe more elegant way to do it.
Maybe
these days.
There's been stuff like that that's happened since then, and they've had to pulp those comics and reprint them. Like there was a Jewish slur in a Wolverine comic. They had to pulp those, and there's been other things that have got through the editorial and got through the mill, and they've had to pulp those. People that have those copies, I'm sure those versions of those copies are worth some money now. But that's an original Uncanny X-Men comic. Never got pulped. Never got pulled.
Yeah. Like I said, it's things change. Like for example, Blazing Saddles getting made today.
I don't know if they would do Blazing Saddles, but if it's a satire, and it's
exactly it's a satire, and it's done in a way where basically everyone who is being discriminatory, racist, comes across as a total buffoon.
Yeah.
And the smartest guys in the movie are always the guys who realize, no, Bart is this,
the sheriff.
Is the sheriff and doing a darn good job, so. Yeah. Which is the point that he was trying to make. And for people, I think a lot of people today don't see, if they watch it, are going to be offended by what's going on and not see the real story that's going on.
Oh, and that's the thing about this X-Men. I read it and I was like, oh, okay, I can read this story 40 years later from when it came out, and I can understand the story perfectly fine, and I don't need the context of the time period, and I don't need the context of today. I can read it by itself and understand what the writer was trying to convey with the story. And that's the same thing with the movie. I can watch that movie, and I have the movie myself in my collection, and I can watch it today as much as I could watch it then, and it's the same thing with that.
Yeah.
But that brings us to an interesting point, though. Since we're both in the business, I'm in the business, you're in the business, in the G.I. Joe community, but not in our real lives business. Those businesses are totally different. But the comic book world and the G.I. Joe community world, we are dealing with the community on a fairly decent regular schedule. Like you guys always dealing with the comments from your podcast, and you had Racktime Rob, and you must have had people making comments, and I have people making comments about mine, and the community as a whole, from what I've seen, is a pretty positive community. But there's definitely a lot of people that, I guess it's the silent the vocal minority over the silent majority. That vocal vocal minority is always speaking trash, saying nasty things, talking trash about people for no better reason, just because they feel like doing it, not having a logical argument to make, not having a point to their comment or their defensible point of view or whatever. Stuff where they make fun of people's clothing, how people are dressed, this, that, and the other. Like, no, I'm sorry, I can't agree with that.
Yeah, I mean we have been very lucky on the show that we haven't had to deal with it too much, but every once in a while, um, somebody decides that they're either going to be wise or they're just like angry and bitter about something. You know, and they either want to use that to try and like monopolize like the comments in the chat, or they're just being just plain outright nasty. I think the last time we had to do it, someone was saying some like really nasty stuff about some of the people on like the Hasbro Joe team.
That's it.
Just stuff that was just like uncalled for. And it's like, you know what, you can not like their presentation. You can not like the products that they're throwing out there. That's fine. You're entitled to that opinion. But to be like mean and hurtful and nasty, we don't need you around.
No.
So, we put the 5 minute, the 5 minute timeout on him. He still wanted to play in that particular cesspool. So, kicked him off. Because we don't need that nonsense.
No.
It's, you can, like I said, people can disagree and be civil.
Yep.
People can disagree and still be friends. Not everybody has to like everything. Not everybody has to, get along all the time. But you're gonna behave yourself. You're gonna act like a human being to other human beings. And that's basically the one hard and fast rule we have on the chat. You're gonna is act like an adult.
Well, and that's the one thing I got after all my years of working for our Walmart and stuff, is respect for the individual, and I think that's a good line to have for your life, and everybody else should the same way, respect for the individual. And I've learned to like that, and I want that for myself, and I don't want to see anybody respect anybody else. These folks in Hasbro, they're putting their hard-earned time and effort and sweat and tears into making a product. They're putting themselves out there, like you and I and the guys on your show. You're putting yourself out there in the public scrutiny. We understand, yes, there's going to be criticism, but there's no need for people to pick on people's personal appearance, to personally attack them. That's not why they're there. They're there to put out a product, to showcase this product, and present the product the best they can present. And we're doing the same thing. I'm putting out a product. This is my product. I'm presenting myself and talking to you and presenting you in a specific way. And if someone were to say something like, boy, that guy, he never gets better glasses. Those glasses look like they're bottle caps or something like that. It makes him look nerdy or whatever. Delete.
Yeah. And, it's if we don't like something on the show, we'll say, hey, not my cup of tea. But, hey, if you like it, great.
Right.
All my co-hosts bought the Blue Ninja set, for example. And, I was like, I kind of like it, but I don't really need it. So I decided not to.
That's entirely up to you.
Yeah, exactly. That was my choice.
I'm an OCD nut. I'm obsessive compulsive, and I can't live without something being complete.
Got to have the completion, the whole.
To a certain level. Like I have 82 to 94 complete, and I have, I'd say, 99% of the vehicles. I'm only missing 4 vehicles, but to an extent, and I'll paraphrase that by saying I have 82 to 94 complete, but I don't have all the weapons. I don't
Yeah.
have all the file cards. I have these books that were put out through Tomarts magazine. They put out these inserts for like 7 months or whatever, and they showed all the file cards. So I don't need all the file cards. I have them in a fashion that makes sense for my collecting.
You
And
could go to
that's
3D Joe's and print one off. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's true too. That's true too. And with the new book, I call it the 10 Commandments, the slab that we're going to be getting from Carson here in the next few months, they're going to have all the file cards in there.
Yeah.
So,
Like I said, if I need to look up a file card, I go to his website. So it's just...
but my point is, everybody collects differently. Everybody understands the brand from their own perspective, their own point of view. But I would never criticize or put anybody else down for wanting every file card, every mint on card figure, or every pristine variation of Recondo, Copperhead, this guy, that guy. I would never do that because that's how they collect.
Yeah, your collection should be defined by you because that's what you choose to spend your money on. And I mean, there's some people out there who it's like a 6-inch GI Joe, never, and are angry about the fact that they exist.
I remember 6 or 7 years ago, a lot of Facebook posts, people were like, hey, would you get a 6-inch figure? Would you get a 6-inch figure? I don't know who was putting that stuff out, if it was Hasbro, but I've talked to Daryl DePriest, and he said it was not Hasbro.
Yeah, and I mean, the 6-inch GI Joe, I mean, over the years, for the collector, the 6-inch scale has become the big scale. Just as... and it just kind of seems to be, these things kind of go in cycles. It used to be, hey, 12-inch, when G.I. Joe started, 12-inch was the way to go.
Yeah.
And then G.I. Joe went 8-inch for Super Joe because the biggest selling action figure at that time were the Mego 8-inch superheroes.
Yeah.
G.I. Joe went 3 3/4 because the biggest selling action figure at the time was Star Wars 3 3/4.
Right.
So, that was a good scale for Joe to jump into because they said, oh, look, we can do vehicles and all this other stuff too. And it's, and it's something that can compete with Star Wars, And
then what? In the 2000s, they don't know what the hell to do. They had every scale under the sun.
Yeah, but, in the 2000s, I think like every scale was running around, willy-nilly anyway. Yeah. Every toy line was its own scale.
Yeah.
There wasn't a real universal scale out there. But now it seems like, we've fallen into a line where, at least for the collector, those Sigma 6s are 8 inches. But yet Sigma 6 also had little 2-inch guys.
That's right.
And at the same time, then we got 3 3/4 Joe's back. Or at least 4 inches.
Well, we have what? Val vs. Venom, Joe vs. Cobra. We had the comic book 2-packs and 3-packs. Then Sigma 6, small and large, all concurrently within a period of 5 years. They were back and forth. And then there was the doll size too.
Yeah. I mean, the Hall of Fame came back. And now the dominant thing, at least for the collector, is the 6-inch. Yeah. So Joe fell in line to the 6-inch. I when the news about the G.I. Joe 6-inch line, was first, even being like rumored, I think it was starting to get rumored because it was kind of, I think a lot of people saw that as the logical progression because of the success of, Star Wars Black Series, right, which was originally a 3 3/4 that graduated to 6-inch, and the Marvel Legends 6 inches, so... And at the time, DC had the 6-inch line from Mattel. Masters of the Universe Classics was a 6-inch line. So that was the next logical step for G.I. Joe. According to many people. And some people are diehards and wanted the 3 3/4, and that's fine. But, your collection's defined by you. If you don't want to jump in on 6-inch, you don't have to.
Thankfully,
that's your right.
But that's true. But thankfully, Hasbro is kind of I don't know who's there doing some of these decisions because they're licensing the brand out to like everybody. So you still can get like the 4-inch through the Haya. You can get the 5 points of articulation through Super 7. You can get those beautiful 1/18 scale ones through several companies. You can get Super 7 7-inch. You can get even G.I. Joe. Hasbro was doing O-ring. There's about 17 or 18 O-rings for this modern O-ring wave, if you include all the stuff that's going on with HasLabs and Transformer crossovers and this and that.
Yeah.
So this is something for everybody if you want it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Vote with your dollar. Buy what you like. Don't buy what you don't like. You're right.
Yeah.
And if someone else is buying something you don't like, well, that's their right. Leave them alone.
That's what it comes down to. But you get these people. They're like, oh,
they're gatekeepers.
Yeah,
the self-appointed, guardians of all that is good and pure. And it's just like, come on.
I was there for O-ring when it first began, and I know what it was when it first began. And I'm not going to tell anybody they can't love O-ring. The first original 13 figures were completely different than 83 going forward, 86 going forward, to 1990 going forward. So
yeah. There's 12-inch collectors out there that are still ticked off that when Joe came back in 1982, he was a little guy. It's like, get over it. It's toy collecting. Sit back and enjoy yourself. We're not.
That's exactly it. Enjoy yourself. It's fun. It's toys. We're
not performing open heart surgery here. Lighten up.
Exactly. But there's a lot of these types of people, and it's sad. And I try to associate myself with people that are like-minded, like myself. You guys are very like-minded as well. That are fair-minded and open, and you listen and you let people have their opinions. You let people disagree and stuff like that, and you don't run them down for their viewpoints and stuff like that. Which I'm the same type of person,
every once in a while we'll see like the comments of people who were like I saw a bunch of people who were commenting they were disappointed there was no 3 3/4 O-ring retro announcements.
Right.
The last couple times that we've been through, and because that's what they really wanted to jump back in on, as opposed to the classified stuff like that. And like I said, that's they were disappointed that they didn't see any. But by the same time, too, they were also, civil. They're allowed to be disappointed that what they were looking for was not being offered. But, they didn't feel the need to poop on the people who were enjoying the 6 inches parade.
And that's fantastic. And I understand what's even going on. I believe Hasbro is having a think on the O-ring because, look, most of the ones that they've released, other than a few of the HasLab ones that were new in the HasLab, everything else has been existing characters in O-ring before. The silicone O-ring is different. The hands are made out of PVC that swivels and makes the thumbs not break. And they have a nice fresh coat of paint that's a little bit decoed differently, like Duke and Cobra Commander are decoed like the cartoon and stuff like that. So some of the decos are different. And they've put like the crossovers, they put them with different things and stuff. So they're all slightly unique in their own way on this modern O-ring.
You can put one against a vintage and tell the difference pretty easily. They look a little softer.
Yes, it's the PVC
around the edges, but I think that might be also too because they probably had to take existing figures to create new molds.
Could be.
Because I'm sure that those molds, no longer exist.
So I know for a fact some of them don't, like Duke.
Most of them don't.
Well, we know that ship that was coming from China that one time, ship went down in the middle of the the Pacific Atlantic or whatever, and they lost the Sky Striker mold, they lost the Tomahawk mold, they lost Duke's mold, they lost Beachhead's mold. They lost
Yeah.
all these things that were like iconic stuff. They lost. That's why Skyscraper had to be rebuilt from scratch. Tomahawk had to get rebuilt from scratch, and it feels smaller than modern Tomahawks. And
Yeah.
Duke, the same thing with Duke. So all that stuff they lost. So a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, they would farm those molds out to like foreign licensors who were making their figures and wouldn't get them back, or sometimes they just got rid of them.
Right, that's true too.
Yeah, they threw them out, or they degraded, and they had to get rid of them.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, they were not, people decry them for, for not thinking long term, but that's who knew.
Yeah, these are toys. I've told this story a million times. I'll tell it again. I played with my toys. They needed
space. Get that thing out.
Well, yeah, but I played with my toys. I wasn't a guy that kept my box pristine and said 40 years from now, I'm going to send it to CG, whatever the hell it's called, and have it graded, and it'll be it'll be worth this much money, and now it's behind acrylic sitting. I
was not hard.
Did that, but I didn't do that. I played with it. You don't know how many Awe-Strikers I threw down the hill that busted into a million pieces. I had 6 Awe-Strikers as a kid because I played with the toys.
Yeah, I was not hard on my toys. Like, I have stuff that's still like in decent condition from back in the day.
Wow.
But I played with them. I just wasn't rough on them because my parents told me, said, look, you break that, I'm not getting you another. So, I was careful. I didn't want them to break.
The O-rings gave out. You have to replace that.
Yeah, but that's replaceable. That's different than, breaking, Migos were notorious for breaking at the knees, even if you were being gentle,
Wow.
Adventure People from Fisher-Price, indestructible. Indestructible.
I think too indestructible. They had to revamp those. Weebles wobble, they don't fall down, but they are good things to hit your sister over the head with.
Oh, not the Weebles. Have you the 3 3/4 Adventure People line from Fisher-Price?
Oh, the thick, like rubbery ones that had like 70s bell-bottom pants.
Yeah. I mean, my brother and I had a bunch of those as kids. I mean, they're really cool sets and stuff like that. Indestructible.
Toys were a little sturdier back then because kids played with the damn thing.
Yeah, but I mean, those were built for kids to play with. I mean, you would literally have to blow them up. I mean, you would have to play with high-powered explosives to destroy something from the Adventure People.
Yeah. Old Star Wars figures from the 70s and earliest, they're pretty sturdy too, because I've seen some ratty looking Star Wars figures, but they're completely whole. There's nothing wrong with them. Yeah, they're yellow, whatever, but they're still solid.
Yeah, the figures hold up better than the vehicles. The vehicles were a little, could be a little on the chintzy side sometimes. They used a thinner plastic than like most of the G.I. Joe stuff did over the years.
Yeah, they did. You're right.
I remember anytime I took the Millennium Falcon outside, if there was a gust of wind that caught under the back panel, would go flying off. I'd have to chase after it.
So what I was trying to get to was, do you think Hasbro, in their time that they're sitting and rethinking the O-ring, do you think they're going to do something different with the O-ring? Bring characters, do what they did in the 2000s with the anniversary sets where they had the Weather Dominator, they had the whatever the other thing was.
The Mass Device.
Mass Device. Sorry, fans. I don't know every single thing in G.I. Joe lore. The Mass Device sets, and they had different other sets too that were along Serpentor sets with zombies and things like that. Do you think they could do something like that, or do you think we could get new characters that never saw the light of day in O-ring? Maybe, because that's really what people want with O-ring. Now we have a basis, a 17-figure basis to move forward. You have your core character Hump. You got all your major people. can we move forward with some new characters, new ideas?
I that would be nice. I don't know if they will because I mean, even if let's face it, I mean, even with the classified line, you're leaning pretty heavy into nostalgia.
Yes.
Um, yeah, they haven't. There have been a little bit of breaks on that, like the Red Ninja figure looks nothing like the Red Ninja from the comics. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, because basically the Red Ninja in the comics is just Storm Shadow colored red, and that's dull.
Yeah.
Um,
They're definitely using a little more imagination with these modern interpretations. That's what
yeah,
I kind of liked with the first 5 or 8 that they did. I was, oh wow, good, something different, something
a
that's
little
not the
bit of
same.
update. A little bit of update is not a bad thing.
I agree.
And if they look a little different from that classic figure of the past, that's okay. And I say that as someone who has also bought some of these figures because they look an awful lot like they did back in the day, just bigger. Like the Gung Ho on the card and the Snake Eyes on the card I just ordered the other day. Um, I mean, that Snake Eyes on the card was my very first G.I. Joe. Well, yeah, I mean, my very first G.I. Joe Real American Hero figure. I did have Bullet Man back in.
I think mine was Destro.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a nostalgia thing for me there too. Just go, oh, look at that. That's just that looks an awful lot like what I saw on a wall on the J.C. Penney's back in 1982. But rock and roll having a two-tone T-shirt, yeah, freshen that up a little bit.
I like it.
Some of the little flourishes on the Duke figure, yeah, fine, go for it. What they did with Spirit, fantastic.
Yeah, that was beautiful. He's my favorite actual Joe character. He's not my favorite figures. Tomax and Samax are my favorite
Yeah,
figures, all from the whole thing. But yeah, they really did a good job with Spirit.
yeah. I mean, the Cobras, like I said, seem to be leaning a little bit more towards the traditional, particularly the name characters.
Yeah.
But they were always a little bit more in the supervillain. This is my costume category too.
Yeah.
And then you kind of like want to stick with that kind of classic look. You don't want to see you don't want to see the Joker wearing something different, right? You want him in that purple tuxedo.
As much
Same
as
thing, you want Destro with that crazy collar and
right,
the silver mask.
but as much as you can get away with it, there are people that have diverted with the Joker, and there's people that are diverted with
Yeah, and
different
you can
stuff.
do that every once in a while. Mike brought up the thing. Spider-Man's classic costume is a classic. It's one of the most recognizable super suits in history.
Yeah, so you can.
But that black costume's pretty cool.
It is. You can divert and go back. That's the nature of comic books. And I've talked to plenty of comic book writers and artists and creators and editors and people like that. You have to freshen this brand up. Superman didn't last 80 years because he was white bread from the Middle East and he had all these powers. They had to change him. They had to make him lightning and red and blue. They had to make him steel. They had to make him a black guy. They had to make him this, that, the other. That kept him around for 80 years.
You have to freshen the mix every once in a while. You have to change with times, and the characters that have lasted 80 years have done that successfully.
Yes.
There's certain design aspects of these classic Joes that you want to see carry through in other designs, but at the same time, if they freshen things up around the edges too, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
I agree 100%. I think the barbecue as an example, and that's barbecue is a 4-letter word at the moment, but I thought that was a modern updated figure of barbecue from the original that was actually very well updated, very well the stuff they did with it to make it fresh. It was a fresher looking figure than the original, and it was good. There's nothing wrong with that.
And I think too, you have to kind of do it on a case by case basis.
Yes.
Rock and Roll getting a little bit of an update, I liked, and in that same wave, I think it would have been wrong if Shipwreck didn't have that classic sailor look.
Well, but thankfully they gave him two heads or two hair parts or
Yeah,
whatever, so he doesn't necessarily have to look like Popeye. He can just look like a grunt on the ship or whatever, which is fine. I would have liked personally the 2000s Bolivar's Venom look of the
the kind of merchant marine look
yeah, I like that
with the
better.
mid hat
That's
and the
just
sweater.
yeah. Personally, I think that's a better look, but that's just my
It's a
opinion.
more modern look, and I know that was something that they first did in the Devil's Due comic, and it's not to say and I could have gone with a shipwreck that looked like that, but I still want classic Navy shipwreck
And
with that silly little parrot on his shoulder, because
well, they
that's
changed
also
it though.
shipwreck.
But look, they
Yeah,
changed it. They gave the poor parrot a peg leg, so they did change it.
I know. I wonder where that came from.
But that's the thing. Maybe that's something they can do. Maybe we can have two Joe 6-inch classified lines. Maybe do the retro with the retro look and the retro feel, and then do classified
And
with
then kind of an update. Yeah,
yeah. And then we have two parallel lines because they do that kind of with Star Wars. They have the retro package Star Wars, and then you have the Black Series, which is all modern stuff, new people, new characters, and stuff like that. I don't know. It's just one of those things. You can
yeah,
speculate all day.
yeah. It's and then buy what you like. It's just
Yeah.
they're making me buy this. No, no one's making you buy this. You are making you buy this. Okay, so
I'm going broke. I'm trying to find places to put stuff because my house is like inundated with toys and comics and
Oh,
everything
I
else.
know. I'm in an apartment. Oh, it's like, well, one of us has to move out just so we can have room for the other stuff.
Come to Florida. You can buy a really nice 4-bedroom, 2,300 square foot home in Florida at a very reasonable price.
Yeah.
If you guys ever want to get out of the cold up there, we need teachers down here too.
Uh, I mean, what would I do when I only have Midwest humidity, for 4 months of the year? How could I handle it with 9?
You have to stay inside. But the good thing is you get plenty of comic books and toys to hang out with. And you just got to commute to your school and get a school that's pretty close to where you're living.
Yeah.
It is
There
tough.
is there's something to be said for not having to worry about a hurricane.
Well, that's true. I was telling Mike that it was kind of difficult getting in touch with him about something, and I had the hurricane, and we were out of power. We were out of Wi-Fi for 5 days in my area, Volusia, and it was one of the hardest hit areas. Volusia was. It was where the
Yeah.
hurricane came on down in Sarasota, Naples, that area, and then when it left, came out of Volusia County that way, and we were in Volusia County. So yeah, it was a little bit rough. I didn't get as bad as a lot of other people. We had some trees down, some fences blown out, and some
We
power stuff. But I had my health, I have my safety.
Yeah.
My partner has his safety and health, so we're okay. That's fine.
We I went through a couple hurricanes up in New York. They do every once in a while sneak up that end. Most of the time they're going to, we never get something hitting with its full fury because they always tended to be later in the season.
Yeah,
I remember they would always seem to roll in around like September or so.
yeah. Because
Um,
the weather patterns are so hot, but then the cold weather is also coming from the north. So both of those combinations creates these storms.
yeah, but I know in every once in a while you get like a Sandy that sweeps up there and just wrecks the place.
Yeah,
But they're rare when they get up to that neck of the woods,
yeah.
into that part of the Mid Atlantic. But yeah, every once in a while we'll get a hurricane. And as I said, I've probably been through like maybe about like 3 of them or so, and they can make a mess. But luckily, it was just well, we got a bunch of loose branches and stuff like that to pick up from the backyard, and maybe power's out for a day or two, or nothing like some of the stuff that we've seen on the news.
That was that. I can't remember which one it was. The one that hit New Jersey and Governor. I can't think of the guy's name.
Is it
He
Governor
was
Christie?
Christie, that's it. I was going to say Chris, but I was like, that can't be the right guy.
That was his first name. It was Chris Christie. Yeah.
Yeah. He was all over the news and stuff like that. New Jersey got slammed really
I
bad.
think that was Sandy. Yeah. That went through, that ripped up New Jersey and then like, went through onto Long Island and stuff like that, where I used to live. And yeah, it did. I mean, that was the one that was flooding the subways and everything like that, and caused major problems.
I've I've lived
But it's
through
that one is
probably
rare. That type of storm is rare up there.
right. Well, up in New York and New England and stuff like that. Storm of the century in 1992, that was really bad. Of course, Sandy was really bad. A couple storms hit New Orleans. That was a couple of them that were really bad in 2008, 2009. Florida's been hit by dozens of them. Thankfully,
Yeah.
where I've lived, I lived on the Tampa side for a couple, and I've lived on the Daytona side for probably about 12. I've never been solidly, like, really affected by any of them badly, just peripherally and light. Thank God for me and my family, but I feel really bad for anybody down south. Miami, they've been hit a lot,
Yeah.
and the Gulf Coast has been hit. Down south, Sarasota, Naples been hit a lot. Thankfully, we have a very good infrastructure for dealing with these things. The electrical people, the construction people, and the state and stuff. And I give thanks to those folks that are out there helping anybody that is in harm's way or did lose power longer than the average person and needs support and stuff like that. I praise those people that are on the front lines that are supporting them. Thankfully, we didn't need to. I started going back to work 3 days after. I missed 3 days of work, but that's nothing compared to some of these people. So